It's that time. Your fix is here. College football is a year-round discussion with these two. Here's JC and Morgan. Mike Morgan of ESPN and JC Shurburtt of 24/7 Sports have you covered. Beginning right now.
Oh, we have survived 2 weeks of the college football campaign, and we are still going strong, headed into week 3. Welcome, everybody. Installment number 211, if you're scoring at home. It is JC and Morgan, and we thank you for stopping by either live or eventually streaming on one of the many platforms that we now have for you, video, audio, you name it, from our YouTube channel to Facebook to Twitter to Spotify to iTunes to Google Play and everything else. We usually do this Tuesday mornings. Last week we did Thursday, but we'll try and stick to a rather regular time. And every now and then we feel like the need to do 2 of these in a given week. You just never know where we're headed. He is JC Shurburtt from a studio somewhere between Chicago and South Carolina. Where is it this week, JC?
It's Chicago still. I had I think some divine intervention last week because there were thunderstorms. I was supposed to go back to South Carolina Friday. Thunderstorms, bad weather, wrecks on the interstate, and I lost my wallet.
Oh,
crazy thing!
Worst feeling in the world.
Went to the store. Very innocuous trip. Wasn't living it up. Would like to say I was at a wild party and it went missing, but lost the wallet, and so I had to stay here for another week and get things like driver's licenses and credit cards sent to me because my address obviously is here. But enjoyed the weekend other than the Bears watch party I went to Sunday. That sucked. But other than that, very nice weekend. It was beautiful weather here in Illinois, 71 degrees, sunny, nice breeze blowing off Lake Michigan. It's one of those handful of days in this area where you go, hey, it's not that bad. So nice weekend. But in Chicago, one more week, and it'll be South Carolina for the next 3. So looking forward to talking a little ball today. It was a weird weekend, I thought, of college football.
Yeah, it was. We got a lots to get to. But by the way, I was a little disappointed in that story. The old JC lose the wallet story, that would have been a Frank the Tank type of story where it feels so good just touching my lips. All right, I'll have one more. Those days are done, though. That Frank the Tank JC is gone. You know, you're on the verge of a marriage, and now you're going to Bed Bath & Beyond and picking out China patterns.
I don't know if I'll have the time.
Don't know if you'll have the time in a little Olive Garden.
Yeah, I wasn't going streaking through the quad and past the gymnasium.
Well, that's disappointing.
And then you get in the car, like, hey, I wonder if KFC's still open. That's a great lie. Is KFC still open? Oh!
Old School is a dimer, and Will Ferrell makes that movie, but like a lot of Will Ferrell movies, Anchorman to be another one, it's like an hour of just laugh after laugh after laugh, and then the plot gets in the way, and they, like most comedies, they don't know how to end them. So the final half hour is just lame. The final half hour to me of Old School and Anchorman, it's like, okay, huge bathroom break time, or just flip it to something else. Watch Casino for the 127th time.
This is little vignettes, and then it ends. There's like, well, how do we wrap this?
How do we wrap it? We have no idea, and that's the thing about comedies; they just don't know how to wrap them up.
Unlike The Hangover, you wasted the Dan Band at the beginning of Old School, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So unlike The Hangover, where at least you get to watch the Dan Band, at the end, I'm with you on Old School, man. I was like, man, I thought it was one of the funniest movies I've ever seen, and then it just died. It just died. Jeremy, regardless of Jeremy Piven, Vince Vaughn, Will Ferrell, I mean, it's a heck of Luke Wilson. It's a heck of a cast.
Heck of a cast. No doubt about that. Again, it is JC and Morgan. You can check out the website, jcandmorgan.com. You can email us. You can hit us up via email, We'll read your emails. We'll get to that in the mailbag segment. We'll have the JC5 momentarily. We'll go around the SEC, and we'll tell you who was the boss of week number 2 in college football. We're broadcasting in 2 different cities, but we are broadcasting technically from the Elite Roofing and Restoration Studios. There was a time we used to open this up every week, JC, with there's nothing we love better than college football and pepper-crusted bacon. I can't find pepper-crusted bacon anymore. I go to Kroger, I go to Publix. It does not exist. Tell me what. I know we're in tough economic times. Maybe the cost of pepper, or they couldn't find anybody to take the job to put the pepper on the bacon. I'm sure that could be a kind of tedious process. But there's no more pepper-crusted bacon, so I'm riding high on regular bacon this morning, but not pepper-crusted bacon. Kind of sad.
That is sad. Last time, I guess, gosh, you're right. Last time I had pepper-crusted bacon was like, I think 2019. I was at Nat and I went to the wine and cheese festival, whatever it's called, at Epcot. We took an adult trip to Disney. You know, alcohol was obviously involved and stuff, and just kind of hung at Epcot, drank around the world or whatever. And she got this Bloody Mary. She loves Bloody Marys with all the stuff is in it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like one time she had one with a crab claw. It was weird. One time she got one with a club sandwich.
That's a little odd. That's a little excessive.
But she digs it. You know, it's like a meal in a glass, and a really good pepper-crusted bacon in that thing, but I can't remember it since. So
somebody find me, if anybody out there listening, if there's a supermarket that actually does carry it anymore, please let me know, and I'd love to check it out. Switching gears to what happened on the field, there's a game that clearly stole the show, and that was Texas-Alabama, and it lived up to the hype. It was 2 teams that clearly, I mean, again, much like watching LSU, Florida State, you and I have seen enough games and have, you know, by virtue of our jobs, sometimes this is not as fun as people think it is. When you're actually watching a game, not as a fan, but you're actually kind of studying the game, it can actually be annoying because sometimes you just want to watch the game and not have to be so analytical. But when you watch those type of teams go against each other, the total athlete quotient, right, the AQ as I like to call it, you just there's a difference. There's a difference between that and like the other 95% of the games that are on throughout the season. And I know for a lot of Alabama fans, so much of what happened Saturday night at Bryant-Denny Stadium was about what Alabama did wrong. And is this the sign of Alabama's Nick Saban dynasty? Is it going south? And Milroe is clearly not Bryce Young, which I have felt that way for a while, which is why I felt pretty good about Texas in this game. It wasn't based on anything else other than quarterback. I was willing to gamble on Quinn Ewers more than I was Jalen Milroe. And Milroe didn't play terribly. In fact, he made some really good plays, but he had 2 soul-crushing interceptions, missed a few reads, and again, he just doesn't have that Bryce Young factor. If Bryce Young plays that game, I have no doubt Alabama wins it. But he's gone, and you had to find a replacement, and Milroe is, at the time, somewhat limited. Doesn't mean he's bad. And the other thing is, you kept hearing about Alabama's got 3 offensive linemen in the starting lineup that are 350 pounds plus. Well, guess what? They got dominated. And I'll tell you who made a lot of money on that Saturday night in Tuscaloosa. Quinn Ewers, who I already mentioned, 349, 3 touchdowns. And 3 of those passes were down the field, deep down the field for 115 yards and 2 touchdowns. So they weren't just like dinking and dunking. Alabama really doesn't allow you to do that. Jatavion Sanders, a 6'4", 245-pound tight end, he made a lot of money. He's probably the second-ranked tight end now on the board, the draft board, behind one Brock Bowers. And T'Vondre Sweat. T'Vondre Sweat dominated. And we're not used to seeing Alabama get dominated on the line of scrimmage. They couldn't block him. So he made a lot of money. He was like a top 100 draft guy coming in. He made a lot of money. The thing that stood out, if you watch that game intently, is that the line of scrimmage, Texas was better. Wide receivers, Texas was better. Tight end, I just mentioned, Texas was better. Quarterback, Texas was better. We're not used to saying, even when Alabama loses a game, it's rarely because their opponent is better in that many phases. But I'm telling you right now, and what from people that I trust, that I talk to, or just kind of read about Texas a little bit more and doing a deep dive on them, they were not going to lose this game based on athleticism. They have recruited well, JC, as you know. They have talent. For whatever reason, they have underachieved for a long, long time. That predates Steve Sarkisian, certainly. But this was the game where it all came together. And maybe this is the season where it all comes together. But again, I would just say this in kind of putting a period on the sentence. This was less about what Alabama did wrong and more about what Texas did right. I'm not saying Texas is back, and kudos to Quinn Ewers for not taking the bait on that post-game interview when that question was posed. Don't be silly. Don't go down that road. You win nothing by saying that in week 2. But Texas clearly has already shown they belong in the SEC, and they will not have to be taking second fiddle from a talent standpoint in the Southeastern Conference from the moment they walk in the door in 2024.
Yeah, boy, it was pretty obvious they were talented. I don't think I've seen an Alabama team that was deficient compared to their opponents in that many categories, like you just pointed out, Mike. So that's, Alabama's lost some games. They lost to Georgia in the championship game 2 years ago, largely because their entire receiving corps got gutted by injuries, and their young players just weren't ready to go, and a lot of them still aren't. But in that many categories, like you just pointed out, my goodness. And Texas does. They recruit in the top 5 every single year. They're sitting in, one of the best states for high school football. There's no reason why they should not be good. I think their issues have been largely intangible, culture related. And, Saturday night, they went out and did what they could, what they're capable of doing. So it's pretty good. I got more on Texas here in the JC5 later, but it was surprising from that matchup standpoint. I also thought, had Milroe, and to put a bow on Alabama, Milroe won the job. I was surprised he struggled throwing it like he did, because I thought surely if he won the job, that they either would not ask him to throw like that and would have a plan, or he had improved. But he kind of looked like the same guy that we saw against Texas A&M, Arkansas, to a certain extent last season, with only some slight improvements. So an Alabama passing game, it's going to be a work in progress.
It's going to be a work in progress. And look, Alabama's really talented everywhere else. Although jury's out on their receiving corps. I thought a year older and more mature, maybe they'd be a bigger factor. But their offensive line is going to be fine. Their defense is still stout. They just got beat by Quinn Ewers is going to be a first-round draft pick. I don't know. I know he's been inconsistent. He lost a lot of weight. He stopped eating Chick-fil-A, which I cannot stand by that. I don't support that, encourage that, and I sure as heck am never going to live that life. But he did, because he realized he needed so he's like lean now. He moves better. He looks better. He might be the third quarterback off the board. I talked about the tight end, the defensive line. Yeah, I mean, it's a really talented team that now has they should win the Big 12. They should be in contention for the playoff. But, Texas might still be Texas and stub their toe in a game they simply should not. If I'm not mistaken, did they not get blown out by Oklahoma State last year? I mean, they had some disappointing losses last season with a lot of the same guys you saw just beat Alabama. So we'll get to that. I already see an email in the mailbox about the SEC. Yeah, I mean, look, we talked about it last week. The SEC went 0-3 last week against top 25 opponents, lost by an average of 16 points per game. This was between this game and the A&M loss at Miami. This was not a great week for the SEC. There's some other, when we go around the SEC, we'll go over it. Other teams that beat up on lesser opponents, but even they did not blow them out the way they should. I think you can safely say this is not your typical depth of the conference. Georgia's still Georgia, and I still wouldn't want to play Bama or LSU. But after that, I don't really know anybody that scares me. Tennessee, we'll see what Tennessee should beat Florida. We'll see how they do. The jury is still out for me on Joe Milton, but we'll find out in due time. All right. With all that being said, the morale of a great nation, as always, hinges on the JC5. JC, let's get into it.
Gladly. Always glad to get into the JC5. It is very important to our country. I realize that. So here we go. Texas is man enough. Now, I talked about this all week last week, and I guaranteed victory for Alabama 2 months ago. Guaranteed it. And I was a lot like Pat Dye in 2002 when Mark Richt took Georgia to Alabama. Pat Dye gets on Feinbaum. He says, Georgia's not man enough to go in there and win that game. Well, I didn't think Texas was man enough to go in there and win that game. I stand corrected. I have gotten emails from Longhorn fans this week that listen to this show and the other show. Amazingly enough, a guy just likes the game. His son goes to South Carolina, so he keeps up with the Gamecocks, but he's a hardcore Texas fan. He just likes our show because we're wonderful, charming people, including yourself, Mike, when you're on it.
Thank you.
Twice a week now, by the way. It's amazing. And he's like, hey, can you quit talking about Texas being soft? I was like, yeah, I can. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry, because I think if you look at that program and sort of every year they're loaded, and every year they go and lose to K-State or TCU or Oklahoma State, you name it. Texas Tech last year beat them. You kind of wonder, like, what's in their collective heads. Look, I think Texas is awfully good, awfully talented. This game is going to catapult them, I believe. But watch out. I don't think they were intimidated by Alabama whatsoever because of how they played them last year. Last year still was 8-5. They came within a point of beating them. And a coach told me, he was a coach at South Carolina back in 2009. The Gamecocks went to Tuscaloosa, that great team with Mark Ingram that won the national title, had them within 13-6 late. And then Ingram got in the Wildcat, and they beat him 20-6. It was a tough game. And over the summer, that coach South Carolina said, well, our kids aren't intimidated by Bama because they played them tough last year. Sure enough, the Gamecocks won that game. Alabama didn't play all that well. Same scenario here. Texas probably gained some confidence by hanging in with them last year when they weren't expected to out in Austin. And they've had this game circled. And Alabama has some deficiencies. And so, but don't, every week's different. The transient property in college football doesn't work. But I do think, though, I'm going to stop calling Texas soft for now. And take it all back. I think they've got a really good I think they got a championship level football program or football team program. They've always been championship level program wise, but team wise, I think they got championship level team this year.
I was happy for Steve Sarkisian. I did a deep dive. I know a lot of the story, but then I had to go back and review it, and I was like, oh yeah, I almost forgot about that. And oh, that's right. But you look at his road to Austin. He didn't do a bad job as the head coach of Washington at all, but had alcohol issues. So he gets whacked. He has to go through the Nick Saban spin cycle of reputation rehab that everybody does. First, I believe, as an analyst, then as the coordinator. Then he goes to the Falcons, and a lot of people say, well, when he went to Atlanta, there was a clear drop off from what they had before. I don't think that was Sarkisian's fault. The Falcons were going to be in pretty bad shape regardless. Now, they happened to lose a really good coordinator who's now one of the best coaches in the NFL in San Francisco. But he didn't do a terrible job. So then Sarkisian, again, goes back to college and then eventually gets the Texas job. And that, if you remember when that hire was made, it was kind of like, Like I didn't sense that Texas fans were having a parade in Austin about that hire, and it didn't exactly like get off to a rip roaring start. But Texas hasn't had a rip roaring season in forever. But Sarkisian, I think that can actually work. I think this might actually be a good fit for both school and coach. We'll see over time. Jury's still out, but it was. I think that he's learned a lot from his mistakes. He's learned a lot from some of the things on and off the field that have not gone right. And maybe he's the right man for the job. All right. So, number one, Texas is man enough. Yes, I will concur. Texas definitely is man enough. Number two.
Can Tennessee end its swamp misery? I'll never forget 2017 champions of life who ended up losing every SEC game that year, by the way. Had them beat.
He's about to get fired again.
Yeah, by the way, champions of life, not so stellar. 73-0 against Oklahoma in the opener. But
yeah,
poor guy. And he went through the Saban rehab and got worse. Right? But I remember they had him beat, and Felipe Franks, of all people, I know that's your favorite quarterback, Mike, jumps out there and fires a rope. I mean, it's 20-15.
Best throw of his life.
I think. Best throw of his life with time running out.
Yes.
And they catch it, and it's a touchdown. It was almost like that Tennessee win over Georgia where Josh Dobbs made that good throw and Jennings caught it after Eason, whatever. You know what happened in 2016. It's been misery after – even last year, as good as Tennessee was and as average as Florida was, it's a 5-point ball game. They struggle with orange and blue. They have for a while. Will they snap it this weekend?
Tennessee's a 7-point favorite, and I think that's right where the spread should be. It's on the road, it's in the swamp, and you will get Billy Napier in Florida's best shot. I'm confident of that. They were a train wreck in week 1 against Utah. This past week, they beat up on basically a mid-major. I don't know what you learn sometimes in those games other than a much-needed confidence boost and maybe to clean some things up. They certainly had plenty to clean. I think this has a chance to be a competitive game. And again, I need to really know more about Joe Milton. We're going to find out more about Joe. We're going to find out two things. We're going to find out more about Joe Milton, because I don't believe Tennessee is just going to run all over Florida and gash them and ground and pound and not have to have Joe Milton make some plays. And then we're going to learn what is Florida. We know what they weren't against Utah. They were not a particularly disciplined and sharp football team and lost to Utah in a game that, quite frankly, wasn't that close. What are they going to be this week against Tennessee? I think we're going to learn quite a bit about both of them. But yeah, to answer the question you posed, can UT end the swamp misery? Sure, they can. They're the better team. I don't think anybody's going to argue that. They are the better football team going in. So we will find out. But yeah, I think the line is right where it should be. Tennessee on the road, hostile environment, a touchdown favorite.
I think it's up to Joe Milton. I think Florida's got to win this one a little ugly. They got to establish the run game, keep Tennessee off the field. People talk about that. That's easier said than done. Last year, LSU tried to do it at home.
That's right.
Got waxed.
That's right.
Because if you're not, I almost think it's better to just match. Unless you got a defense like Georgia did last year, it's better to just match their scores. So I don't know. Florida's going to have to. Joe Milton's going to have to decide. Joe Milton's performance will decide this game, Mike. I think if he misfires, that it definitely gives a ball control team like Florida a chance. If he's on it all, though, and Tennessee's able to run it, and Florida can't stop them, they definitely will snap the streak. Mike, the Colorado coaching staff is very good. I watched a lot of their game. They made great adjustments against Nebraska, especially offensively. Shurburtt Sanders played well. I think one thing we can say about Deion Sanders is he did hire good coaches. With all the talk of the portal players and all that good stuff, that's a well-coached football team in my eyes.
No question. I mean, we talked about Sean Lewis last week. He was part of the Boss segment. And they are, again, first off, look, Nebraska, as you've documented many times, their OC is not good. But they don't have athlete. My goodness. I mean, I'm watching that, and the Sims kid is a transfer from Tech, and I mean, he can't time the snap properly. They have problems just not snapping the ball into the motion man, and it's just ugly, ugly stuff. But again, the other thing that stood out is just where has Nebraska been recruiting? Like it, they got a ways to go. That's not a Matt Rule X's and O's problem right now as much as it is they got to find players. They see, that's the thing about, you talk about Texas and Nebraska are similar but different. They're similar in that they're both somewhat iconic programs that have been in the doldrums quite a bit the last 10, 15 years. Take your chunk of time. But Texas didn't stop having elite athletes. Texas had cultural issues, they had other issues, had coaching issues. Nebraska just doesn't have players, and I don't know how that gets fixed. But they don't. You watch them, and it's like, man, oh man, you would have thought Colorado was the more talented team. I think they are, because Shurburtt Sanders is a better quarterback. Travis Hunter is the best athlete on the field. They've got other receivers that are undersized but really hard to cover. They're not going to lose a quickness battle on offense. They might lose a size and strength battle, and they haven't really been tested in that regard. Eventually, they will be. But Nebraska can't play smash mouth. Like if this was Tom Osborne, they would have just ran all over Colorado and won the game. But they're not equipped to do that. But yeah, I mean, everything that Colorado did, I think they did the best they possibly could in one short off season to make this a competitive team, a really good story that will continue to be competitive. I mean, you look at that schedule, like they should be Colorado State. Oregon, I'm not going to say that's not a winnable game. I mean, they could compete against Oregon. Southern Cal, I don't know. But no, they're going to have a chance to. They're not done yet. Like they're 2-0. They're going to win more games just based on what I can see. And Shedeur Sanders, I mean, I've been impressed. Like you always get that knock when you're the son of the coach. Okay, how much of this is legit versus how much is dad just taking his quarterback along the way? No, I mean, you watch him play. He is absolutely legit. He can make the throws. He can make plays with his legs, but he doesn't rely on them. He doesn't make many mistakes. I mean, he's played nearly flawless football through 2 weeks, which I didn't see that coming either. So yeah, it's a terrific story, and no question, their staff, what they've been able to do, what they were able to compile, was about as good as you could ask.
I'll flip it over 0-0. Hats off to the Nebraska defense playing their butt off early, stopping that team.
Yeah.
I flip it over, Mike. I hear Gus Johnson. And they're bringing in 3 tight ends and extra linemen, and this power set. This is what they want to do. And this whole offense operates slower than molasses, slower than owl poop. Okay, it's the owl poop offense. The owl shat offense is what I call it. And it's very methodical, which is fine. But if you, not in modern college football, man, I'm just going to say, for a guy that was an assistant to an assistant for 1 year in the NFL, for a college coach in the NFL and Matt Rule, and this guy thinks he's Andy Reid, it's ridiculous. I feel sorry for Nebraska fans. So he's bringing in all these tight ends, right, and all this extra heavy on 3rd and 5, which is not really a power run down in distance, but he's doing it. So I'm like, all right, we'll see what happens. Sims gets in the shotgun. Sure enough, the motion man goes and hits the motion man in the ass, and the ball goes tumbling forward.
That happened multiple times.
I've seen this movie before, and you know why? It's not that Jeff Sims can't take a snap. I mean, he didn't have the problem with Georgia Tech. It's because these players are confused. I saw it at South Carolina for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
When players are confused, it looks like a dumpster fire. And it seems like certain people that coordinated that way for 10 games, and then the last 2 where they were mandated to simplify it, and they scored 94 points and beat a top 5 Tennessee and a top 10 Clemson. Seems like you'd learn your lesson.
Mm-hmm.
But oh no, you want to go multiple? I mean, it's even worse. So I feel sorry for Nebraska. Anyway, Karma
Number 4.
in Pullman, Washington, where you've got that up there. I've been to that stadium before.
That's Barton Stadium, baby.
It's smaller, but it's a nice little setup there.
Yeah, it's about 32,000.
Out there in extreme eastern Washington, right near the Idaho border. Okay, karma in 2 ways. Number 1, Washington State knocks off Wisconsin, right? And look, I'm a Luke Fickell fan. I understand why they did what they did, but I also am a firm believer that if a program gets away from its DNA, especially a program that is not in like Texas could do anything they want. If Texas wanted to run the wishbone, nobody cares. If Alabama, if one of the Florida schools, whatever they want to run on offense, although I do think, spread is best for that. Georgia can run whatever they want. Wisconsin, their equalizer all these years has been the ground and pound. It's worked for Alvarez, Belima, whatever. So Luke Fickell goes, I'm going to go hire Phil Longo. And so this team from the mighty Big Ten, right, the one that turns its nose up to Washington State, goes out and loses to WSU for the second straight year and proceeds to have 75 yards rushing? Karma. The karma was thick in Pullman on Saturday.
Yeah, again, hats off to Wazoo. And for those that are not watching and just listening, every week I pick a stadium that's somewhat relevant to something that happened in college football. Last week was Wyoming, and this week I picked Martin Stadium, which opened its doors in the 70s. And like you said, it's small, about 32,000. But I picked it because, and we had Ryan Leaf on, proud Wazoo alum, part of our quarterback derby segment over the summer. That is a really proud fan base. It is a school with tradition. They love their college football, and right now Washington State and Oregon State, they are just in the abyss, and there's lawsuits going on. The teams and the programs that have already defected or going to defect for greener pastures, they're trying to vote on what the Pac-12 does. So they're saying, well, wait a minute now, you don't get to bolt and kind of legislate what's happening. So I thought it was a great story that went under the radar that Washington State beat Wisconsin. I thought, no knock on Wisconsin. You mentioned all the problems and the somewhat curious move. I mean, the Phil Longo one, that was one of the of moves of the offseason. It just didn't add up. But more importantly, I'm happy for Washington State because I want to see Washington State. We got a big listener, Tony. He's a big Oregon State fan, an alum who lives in Atlanta, but spent 4 years in Corvallis. Like those are great fans, great program. They deserve better. So kudos to Washington State for winning that game.
Absolutely, and for Tom Tuttle from Tacoma. Tom Tuttle, played by the late John Candy in the '85 comedy.
You love that movie.
Volunteers. It's why I stand up. That and the Flag Guy.
On game day
are the 2 reasons that I stand up for the Cougs, man. Because the Flag Guy is epic, and that movie, when I was a kid watching it, they get caught in like the Southeast Asian communist country, right? And so Candy gets kidnapped. It's Tom Tuttle from Tacoma, the Washington State homer, gets kidnapped by this, revolutionary army, and then they're coming to like fight a war in this military transport, and they're singing the Washington State fight song.
You were one of 27 people
Washington State
that spent their hard-earned money on a ticket for that fine flick.
Oh, it's great. Young Tom Hanks. He back when he Splash fame. Anyway,
there was a rivalry back then. Tom Hanks, Michael Keaton. I've always been a huge Michael Keaton guy, but they were both former stand-up comics. Then they turned like serious actors, and I put my money on Keaton. And Keaton's had a terrific career, but obviously Tom Hanks, trumped it in the overall scheme. 2 Oscars will do that.
He got better parts.
He did get better parts, but the parts that Michael Keaton played, Tom Hanks couldn't do.
Yeah.
Tom Hanks could not do Billy Blaze and Night Shift, a very underrated movie. It wouldn't be as funny.
Or Ray Kroc from McDonald's.
Definitely couldn't do Ray Kroc of McDonald's. Keaton was awesome. The Founder is the name of that movie. Was absolutely awesome in that. He's awesome in Mr. Mom. I do a whole thing on that, but I'll still take Keaton.
Beetlejuice.
Never saw it, but I heard he was brilliant in it.
There's a sequel coming out, brother.
I know.
Beetlejuice. Winona Ryder's in it. Anyway,
number 5.
All right. So speaking, just like 1980s comedies, there's depth in the ACC this year, my friend. It's not Huey. You remember the most epic Mike Morgan line on the history of this podcast was, I'm just going to say this: Clemson is Huey Lewis, and the rest of the ACC is the news.
The news.
Well, brother, the news is
the news has a name now.
Some of those
new saxophone players,
news guys, are like getting solo careers and stuff because and one of the games we have not touched on that I think is fascinating, because I didn't expect this outcome either. As confident as I was that Texas was going down in a blaze of glory in Tuscaloosa, I thought Miami was going to get slaughtered by A&M. Just because you kind of bought into the Bobby Petrino thing, and Bobby did call a pretty good game, but you think A&M would have an advantage on both lines of scrimmage on defense. But boy, Miami just kind of rose up and whipped them. Tyler Van Dyke, great point. They look. I'm not saying they look like the U of old, but they look like what you expect out of a Miami team with speed, winning one-on-ones, playmaking ability. Night and day better from last year when they were getting their butt kicked by Middle Tennessee State at home.
Night and day from a team. Remember, I had their matchup with Virginia. They didn't score a touchdown in regulation. They took 3 or 4 overtimes for them to win the game. The first 2 of which they didn't score. They went like 6 quarters or whatever without scoring a touchdown against Virginia, which was an awful team. Van Dyke didn't play in that game, but Van Dyke was bad last year. Then he got hurt, and there was talk about him being benched. Miami was a train wreck a year ago. Van Dyke now has turned it back on. Van Dyke is now playing like, again, an NFL draft pick. They've got, not surprisingly, talent on the perimeter. Okay, there's no excuse for Miami not to have speed and talent on the perimeter, and they have it, and they showed it, and A&M couldn't guard it. Then offensively, Wigman was fine, but the whole Petrino offense, they were not great. Look, I don't want to get into this. Every time A&M loses a game, we got to talk about Jimbo's buyout. And what is it up to? $72 million? No, it's 73.5. And it is what it is, as they say. But A&M is still, they're just not there. They're not there. And I don't know if people thought all of a sudden Petrino alone was going to turn that around or what, but and all those 5-star recruits that are now a year older, and no, they're good. They're not a terrible team. They're going to win some games, but they're not in that upper tier of the SEC. And yeah, it's okay to lose at Miami in a half-empty stadium, which Miami is prone to do, because again, the biggest Miami fans have never been to the campus. They're terrific at bug control, though. I mean, I'm telling you what, if you got a problem with palmetto bugs, there's right now 100 guys with big U tattoos on their deltoid. They'll go there and they'll spray those suckers dead. And then they'll tell you all about how it's all about the U. But big win for the U, and for A&M, yeah, not so much. That's a story that's going to continue. If Texas, Alabama didn't happen, I'm convinced the talk all yesterday, today on Feinbaum and everything else will be all about the Aggies and Jimbo. But when Alabama loses a game at home in convincing fashion, that steals the headlines for the SEC, and it has. But make no mistake, A&M people and boosters, they saw what happened in Coral Gables. Well, it's not really in Coral Gables because, again, that stadium,
Opelika.
It's a really expensive Uber ride to go from Miami's campus to where the Dolphins play. But in Palm Beach, not Palm Beach Gardens.
Opelika. It's
no, not
Opelika.
really?
It's Opelika. Yeah,
I don't think
that's
that's the
the
actual street
address.
address.
I'm
Seriously.
pretty sure either that or Miami Gardens, maybe.
It's Miami Gardens. That's
Miami
what I mean.
Gardens.
I was about to say
I know
Palm
the
Beach Gardens.
Opelika Airport's right near there, the executive airport. My brother's a pilot, so
Well,
I
he would
know that.
know. He would know for sure. Anyway, yeah. To your bigger point and the final to cap off the JC5, the ACC. You talk about the North Carolina win over South Carolina. You talk about the Florida State win over LSU. Now you've got the Miami win over A&M. The Wake Forest win
Wake
over
beat
Vanderbilt.
that game was not that competitive on the scoreboard.
No, not at all. Not at all. And then Duke did it to one of their own, but Duke beats up Clemson, and that just says, well, the bottom of the ACC is pretty darn good.
I think Louisville's been impressive through
Louisville's
2 games.
better. Well, they got their coach now. I mean,
that's their guy.
That's their guy. That's going to make all the sense in the world. So, I mean, Syracuse is still going to be Syracuse, and Dino Babers will probably be fired at the end of the year. But every conference has a bottom feeder. But you're right. Your bigger point, they've got some depth this year. The ACC definitely has some depth this season.
The Virginia schools may be the 2 worst.
Isn't that that's just crazy. I mean, Virginia used to be, it was like death taxes, and Virginia's going to win 7 games, which is not terrible. And then Virginia Tech, not that long ago under Frank Beamer, was a true national championship contender. And to watch those schools now just languish, it's hard to watch. It's hard to believe that they have fallen that far from grace. All right, incredible, epic installment of the JC5. I feel like morale has been boosted across a great nation and beyond. We will continue to raise spirits on the other side of this timeout. We'll go talk about the rest of the SEC, go around the SEC, also the boss coming up later as well. It is JC and Morgan, presented by Chicken Cock, originated in Paris, Kentucky. Find Chicken Cock near you on the Chief Sports app in the Chicken Cock Challenge section on the home screen, one of the fastest growing bourbons in the U.S. If you're like me, you love some bourbon. Smooth, little to no aftertaste or bite. Serving JC and Morgan. Get your Chicken Cock today. Serve your game day with Chicken Cock, proudly made in Kentucky, but South Carolina owned. Quick break. Stay tuned. More JC and Morgan coming up.
Chicken Cock originated in Kentucky, like so many other bourbons. And so the resurrection of it, Paris, Kentucky, that's the county seat of Bourbon County. So much of this whiskey was being made in that Bourbon County, put on ships and barges and shipped down Ohio, down the Mississippi, and got to New Orleans, where it got distributed all over the world. And people kept saying, well, hey, I want some more of that whiskey from Bourbon County. And so that's how bourbon whiskey got its name. And Chicken Cock originated actually in Paris, Kentucky, which is today Bourbon County.
Mike here for Elite Roofing and Restoration. Chances are you're a homeowner, you're going to have that roof replaced at some point. Could be because of wind or hail damage. Could be because it's just that time. The roof is old and you don't want to take any more chances. Go ahead and call Elite Roofing and Restoration. They will take terrific care of you, as they have for me over the years. They provide exceptional roofing services. They offer a highly knowledgeable staff on insurance claims for roof repairs and replacements, as well as an extensive catalog of materials and colors to ensure your roof looks as good as it performs. So how do you do it? Well, you just start off. You can go to the website, eliteroofingga.com. That's eliteroofingga.com. Go ahead and fill out the form. Get connected with the fine folks at Elite Roofing and Restoration, and they will take care of the rest for you. Elite Roofing and Restoration. Don't settle for second best. Hey, this is Mike Morgan, and like many of you, I love staying active. It makes me feel better. It helps me enjoy a better life. But whether you're a world-class athlete or someone just keeping the dream alive like me, you'll want to make sure you have someone who can handle the injuries that are going to arise. That's where the world-renowned Dr. Michael Hatrack of Synergy Sports Wellness and Synergy Release Sports come into play. He's been my guy for nearly a decade, and he has served thousands of people, including over 400 NFL players, over a career that spans 47 years. Yeah, he's that good. And his staff's personalized biomechanical treatments and therapies can handle it all. Back pain, knee pain, shoulder pain. We all know the injuries, but few know the solutions the way Dr. Hatrack and his terrifically trained staff do. I've seen others. No one delivers the results the way they do. That's why people from all over the country come to Synergy's 2 Georgia locations, Buckhead and Alpharetta. Dr. Hatrack has trained a team of chiropractors in his proprietary technique that has been proven to yield life-changing outcomes from professional athletes to the Joe Schmoes of the world like, well, me. Check out the website to set up an appointment today, synergyreleasesports.com. That's Synergy with an S, releasesports.com. You can also find a link for them on our website, jcandmorgan.com. Let the incredible staff at Synergy take care of you so you can reach your wellness goals. Back with you on JC and Morgan. He is JC Shurburtt. I am Mike Morgan. It's another installment of JC and Morgan. JC5 is in the books. We get now to around the SEC. By the way, I should mention this. JC and I, we haven't talked pre-show, if you will. We kind of exchange messages on some of the things we're going to go over formatically. For those that want like a hot take on the Mel Tucker situation, I don't have one for you. Like many of you, I have read the transcripts online, the he said, she said aspect of it. There's a lot of things in play here, and I don't feel strong enough in the facts to give you a hard line opinion on one way or another who's telling the truth. I will say this. There has been a trend in big-time college football and college basketball where the buyouts are insanely high, okay? Tucker signed that ridiculous contract. Nobody really knows why, but they gave him, based on one good season in East Lansing with an NFL running back, Kenneth Walker, that ran over everybody, they gave him like a $90 million deal. His buyout, after going 5-7 last year, is like $77 million. Okay, now that's unusual even in a day and age of exorbitant buyouts. But the trend has been, and we have seen this. We saw it with Jeremy Pruitt of Tennessee. We've seen it with. If you can fire someone with cause, you don't have to pay that buyout. So I think there could be a little bit of buyer's remorse here. I think there could be a lot of people that are like, are we really getting our money's worth with Mel Tucker? And if they can somehow turn this into with cause, then that's going to be done lickety-split. That's my only feel for this whole. I can't tell you what Mel Tucker has actually done or not. I'm not going to sit here and tell you Mel Tucker's a good person, bad person, and the female involved. I've read her story. I'm not going to give you a strong take on that either. I will tell you what I do feel about Mel Tucker, the coach. I don't think he's a very good football coach. I don't think he was ever justified that kind of contract based on what he did at Colorado, based on what he did at Michigan State, and even going back to when he was a coordinator at Georgia. It was the makings of one incredible, I'll use the term, I don't mean this disparagingly. You've heard me use it before, JC. They have a sugar daddy. They have an alum who now owns the Phoenix Suns, who's got gobs and gobs of money, who's a Michigan State alum and was on the basketball team. He made his money in, I don't know if it was real estate or hedge fund, whatever. He's a billionaire. And to him, maybe that wasn't a lot of money. But now all of a sudden, I think when the dust settles on this, if he can be fired with cause, do not be surprised if that happens. For the time being, it is a suspension. And actually, Brett McMurphy, who does a good job, he reported flat out fired, and then you had a couple of national reporters get into a pissing contest as to who was right. Time will tell if Brett was actually right or not, but that is the story right now, and there's just not much more I can add to it.
Me neither. We'll see kind of what happens. I think at that particular institution, just like at other institutions. There's just certain things that are magnified, and because of what they went through with Dr. Nasser, the gymnast, rapist guy that
Mm-hmm.
got away with it for years and all this other stuff. That's a very specific thing to Michigan State. It's not an indictment of college athletics. It's not the indictment of males. Some columnist jumped the gun and all that good stuff about Mel Tucker. It's just because Michigan State has a strong zero tolerance policy for anything like that, and they should. And they should. I mean, when an institution goes through something like that, you don't want the same types of things, even if it's just kind of a little bit there close. You don't want any kind of narrative like that at Michigan State. So that's A. B, I'm with you. I don't know who to believe. I don't know what to think. I'm familiar with Brenda Tracy's work. I've always thought, she's very courageous in sharing her story. I don't agree that Mel Tucker, I started calling him 5-win Mel last year, like 6-loss Jimbo,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think he was worth quite that much. He had a really good first year where he had a lot of good transfers, including one that's, I think, the starting running back for the Denver Broncos now that somehow he took from Wake Forest. And somehow they found this kid in the state of Tennessee when they got him. He's from Tennessee. And if you're the Vols, you're sitting there sick when you're watching that, right? Or Vanderbilt. But, lightning in a bottle that one year, not very good last year at all. Starting quarterback left. I don't know. I think that was too much to pay him, but I'm not going to sit here and say the man is guilty of something when I don't have the proof. I'm not going to sit here and jump the gun like a lot of people do, including the governor of Michigan, and condemn the guy before the facts come out. I was just going to say this. If he did it, he needs to be fired based on being that stupid and not realizing, that kind of stuff at Michigan State is not going to fly, at all. And it's not going to fly anywhere these days, but, that's stupid to get yourself in that situation. So you deserve to be fired. And, but then number two, if he's innocent, I think a lot of people owe him an apology. Nancy Armour from USA Today, one. Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, two. And a lot of other people that are with a Twitter handle these days and a spot behind a keyboard or a microphone that tend to condemn people in the court of public opinion before they're condemned as far as the justice system or some sort of legal investigation determines. I could go out there tomorrow and start accusing people of things and put it in public. Someone could accuse me of something. Nobody deserves to be condemned before the facts all come out. Now, is it shady how they handled it at Michigan State to a certain extent because it's been investigated since December? You could say that. And institutionally, whoever made that call not to talk about it or tried to cover it up or keep it quiet needs to be fired. Because, again, that institution cannot afford scandals of this nature at all. You just can't. It would be like if a Notre Dame player made up a girlfriend again. You don't want to go through that again.
Well, the term zero tolerance comes to mind.
Yeah, zero tolerance.
That's what comes to mind to me. And if you're the football coach at that school, based on what's happened recently, you got to think zero tolerance.
Keep it in your pants, sir.
I know some people are like, he's married too. I don't get into that. I just don't get into people's personal stuff. But what the university is more concerned about is the charges at hand, and we'll see how that plays out. I can't even imagine how distracting that must be for the players as all that is going on.
And Mark D'Antonio's back too, by the way.
I saw that, and boy, do they miss. I mean, that dude was a hell of a football coach. Mm-hmm. And Michigan State, there was a time Michigan State had it rolling pretty damn good, and now we're at the Ohio State, Michigan dominating the world.
Penn State,
the Big Ten. And we got an email about Penn State from Big Ten Justin. We'll get to later that actually poses a question about the hierarchy of that league. All right, let's go around the SEC. We'll do it quickly here because we're running a little bit late. SEC's final record in week 2. If you looked at it and you said, hey, the SEC went 10-3. That's not bad. Shoot. I mean, that's not bad at all. But then you take a closer look. Tennessee, I realize a lot of people didn't watch these games. So let me get you up to speed. Tennessee struggled to create any consistency against Austin Peay. They took their first lead with 15 seconds remaining in the first half. Arkansas, in their game against Kent State, led 7-6 with 2 minutes remaining in the first half. I realize it's a four-quarter game. Middle Tennessee had a fourth-quarter drive to win the game against Missouri. They had a pass fall incomplete on fourth down. Missouri's 2-0, but it hasn't exactly been an impressive 2-0. Kentucky, Liam Cohen has not been the answer, and fans can't blame Will Levis for what's going on in Lexington right now. The offense hadn't been good. Kentucky didn't take its first lead against Eastern Kentucky, EKU, until nearly 40 minutes into the game. That's with Liam Cohen back, who, by the way, had to go to the hospital after the game. Hopefully he is okay. Across the 13 games, if you go by point spreads, the SEC underperformed the line by 116 points, nearly 9 points per matchup. The league was 3-9-1 against the spread, with the 2 wins coming against FCS opponents. Georgia did shake off another slow start for pulling away against Ball State. For those that are down on Georgia, I'm not there. Georgia is still, for my money, at the time, the best team in college football and are still awfully stout. But yeah, there was a time there where some of these games were hanging in the balance, and you already had the matchups last week, and then you had A&M getting blown out on the road against Miami. And then, of course, later that night, Texas beating Alabama. So this is like a Danny Cannell fantasy. I didn't check Danny Cannell's Twitter feed. Oh, my – yeah, Joel Klatt.
Klatt and Danny Cannell are, like, loving it.
Oh, I know. You know Joel won't admit that. But you know those guys were just like, oh, man, this is great. I told you the SEC is not that good. Look, the SEC, as we talked about at the top, is probably not as stacked as it normally is. However, Georgia is still elite. And LSU and Alabama, no one wants to play either one of those teams. LSU and Alabama are still damn good teams. They just have losses against quality opponents. Now, the rest of the league, time will tell. I want to see what Tennessee does against Florida. I want to see somebody else step it up. But, yeah, the middle is not great. I didn't think it would be, quite honestly, coming in. I felt really good about 3 teams, Georgia, LSU, and Bama. I still feel good about those 3 teams. And I still think they're all going to win a lot of games. But if you want to judge it from the bottom up as opposed to the top down, then, yeah, there's things you can pick at. If you are an SEC hater, then you've had a fun 2 weeks. There's no doubt about it.
Oh, yeah, even down to like Georgia not getting out to a great start. But how excited – I mean, you just won 2 straight national titles. How excited are you really to play Tennessee Martin and Ball State?
Not at all. If you're a fan, not at all.
Players like to get out and play.
Sure.
Or is Mike Bobo going to dial up his best game?
Well, you hit on it, JC.
Yeah, I don't know.
You hit on the key point on the Oklahoma game that was and why it is not. That is a money deal. That how that game disappeared off the schedule is a money deal. It's not that all of a sudden they were afraid to play Oklahoma.
Yeah.
You with me?
Yeah, they did not. They did not. It was about the return game. Because,
that's right.
You have these bye games where the FCS or group of 5 going rates like 1.8 million or whatever. But there's still money that exchanges hands when you do a home and home with another Power 5.
That's right. And
they couldn't make it whole again. And so they just kind of said, we'll just cancel the whole thing. Because people ask, well, why did Texas and Bama play? Well, because that's part 2 of a home and home.
That's right.
Oklahoma was not going to do a return game in Athens in the non-conference, and thus the money wasn't going to be right. And so
And Georgia's got big time out of conference games coming up.
A ton.
I mean, and their reputation has not been to just feast on a week out of conference schedule. If you look at Georgia's history under Kirby, or even going back to Mark Richt, they don't have to apologize for their non-con. So yeah, it's been a kind of a yawn fest first 2 weeks for Georgia football, and they will start getting into meatier games, and we'll figure out what they're all about. But because they haven't played anybody, I think people are forgetting just how good Georgia is a little bit. They'll be reminded when they start playing more intriguing games.
I'm never going to talk smack about Georgia and their schedule this year, man, because look, so they had a game with Texas scheduled next year, but it's going to be a league game now. So next year they play Clemson and Georgia Tech in the out of conference. Play Georgia Tech every year. 25 and 26, home and home with UCLA. 26 and 27, home and home with Louisville. 28, Florida State comes to Athens. 29, they go to Clemson. 30, Clemson and Ohio State and Georgia. Here's Georgia's non-conference right now in 2030. Clemson, Ohio State, Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
I mean, and North Carolina A&T.
And keep in mind, we might have a 9-game conference schedule by then.
Look, man, nobody needs to be jumping on. It's not like Georgia intentionally said, "Oh, all right, we're gonna take the Kentucky way out and try to pretend like our mediocre ACC rivals really good." Which, by the way, Louisville may be really good again now, but and play 3 week Sisters of the Poor. They didn't do that, and I don't. Anybody out there, and you get this ignorance from Big Ten land too, because they can't bother to look up who they're playing in the future or anything like that. It's Georgia, look at their schedule. Yeah, I don't blame them. I do think they look a little disinterested. Sometimes that catches up with teams when they play a stiffer bunch of competition. So. We'll see what South Carolina can get done with them this weekend. I kind of think the Gamecocks are probably going to throw it 60 times and pray. But it's we'll see if that happens. But I think any kind of criticism of Georgia the first 2 weeks is a little bit unfounded, because I just don't know how. What are they supposed to do? They won by 41 and 42. I mean, they took care of business.
By the way, you mentioned a Georgia-South Carolina game. You've got Tennessee-Florida we talked about. LSU-Mississippi State. I think that's kind of intriguing. Arkansas-BYU. So you're going to start learning more and more about what some of these teams have to offer in the Southeastern Conference as we get into the nitty-gritty of the season. All right, timeout here. We'll come back, tell you who's the boss. Who are some of the best performers over the week?
Down here in the South, we don't always see eye to eye. While our taste in college football teams, or what sauce, if any, goes best on a rack of ribs, or what to mix with our Dixie vodka might be up for debate, we can all agree there's nothing better than a Southern tailgate. And like our favorite college teams, our ingredients come from small towns and big cities. They're grown in Southern soil, are crafted by Southern hands, and proudly represent the South in our backyard and beyond. So raise a glass of Dixie Southern Vodka to celebrate being made in America and raised in the South.
Hey, folks, want to tell you about our friends at Titan Construction Group really quick. They're a mid-Atlantic-based general contractor, specializes in retail, restaurant, and office construction. TCG strives to separate itself from other general contractors by adding value every step of the process. From project budgeting to estimation, value engineering to construction, they focus on those relationships and not the transaction. Titan builds partnerships one project at a time. Among their clients are Starbucks, Crumble Cookie, Blake Pizza, Home Goods, 15 plus years experience, based in Midlothian, Virginia, and contracted in Virginia, West Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. So get on their website, TitanCGinc.com. That's TitanCGinc.com. Get in touch with Brad if you're in need of a general contractor that focuses on going above and beyond for their clients. That's Titan Construction Group, a proud sponsor of the JC and Morgan podcast.
Mike here for Elite Roofing and Restoration. Chances are you're a homeowner, you're going to have that roof replaced at some point. Could be because of wind or hail damage. Could be because it's just that time. The roof is old and you don't want to take any more chances. Go ahead and call Elite Roofing and Restoration. They will take terrific care of you as they have for me over the years. They provide exceptional roofing services. They offer a highly knowledgeable staff on insurance claims for roof repairs and replacements, as well as an extensive catalog of materials and colors to ensure your roof looks as good as it performs. So how do you do it? Well, you just start off. You can go to the website, eliteroofingga.com. That's eliteroofingga.com. Go ahead and fill out the form. Get connected with the fine folks at Elite Roofing and Restoration, and they will take care of the rest for you. Elite Roofing and Restoration. Don't settle for second best. title race. So congratulations to Wazoo. And that is your week 2 installment of
The
Boss.
Yeah, I love that Rice result. I thought that was, kind of funny. Houston's in the Big 12 now, and they're getting they're not doing so swift.
That
Big 12
is,
play hasn't started yet.
I've been to Rice to call a
Oh,
game.
yeah.
That is one of the most difficult jobs. We've talked about New Mexico State. Rice is a really, really good academic school, a very small enrollment, very expensive school. But they don't have like what SMU does. SMU can at least say, hey, we were pretty damn good back in the 80s. I don't know the last time Rice was really damn good.
Mm-mm, they haven't. Todd Graham had a good year there, I think.
Yeah.
And then of course, he left promptly. I think Ken Hatfield won some games there, maybe, because he went there after Clemson. Other than that, man, it's been brutal. For them.
Rough.
And they're one of these schools that built a big old stadium back in the day. So it's like Stanford Stadium. Stanford used to have an 85,000 seat stadium, and I happened to go to Palo Alto for a camp one time before they remodeled it and cut it in half and made it nice. It's just this big old like wooden bleacher, like erector set looking. You're like, oh man! And this was like 2005. And I'm like, this thing is, I'm scared to sit up here. They have earthquakes out here. So I'm sitting there thinking I'm going to be like in a pile of wood kindling, if this thing shakes to death. So it's good for that. And I did want to mention this. I got an email while you were talking, doing the boss here. And you mentioned Jimmy Sexton from Josh Barton of sportsbetting.ag. First odds on first NCAA coach to get fired this year.
This should be juicy.
I'll give you Jimbo Fisher, number 1, 4-1 odds.
Wow.
Champions of Life, number 2, 5-1 odds, tied with Danny Gonzalez of New Mexico and Tony Elliott of Virginia. Neil Brown from West Virginia, 6-1. Tom Allen from Indiana, man, he was a hot commodity a few years ago, 7-1. Jeff Hafley, who's at Boston College during the pandemic year, was good, 9-1. The aforementioned Dino Babers at 10-1, along with Justin Wilcox from California. It rounds it out with Dana Holgerson from Houston, 12-1. And then Brent Venables. I don't know why Brent Venables is on there. Eli Drinkwitz at 16-1. And then Ryan Silverfield of Memphis is 20-1. So that's those are the Vegas odds on who is the who's the first coach to get fired. Jimbo, the $77 million man, 4 or 5 loss Jimbo. He's leading the way.
You know what I like to say? There's big time money, and then there's oil money. If there's anybody that can find the pockets deep enough to pay that, it's them. And by the way, I this was a late addition to the boss. Remember last week I said the SMU boosters are the boss because they basically brokered a deal with the ACC. They said, we don't need your stinking TV money. We got this. We'll pay you don't have to give us a dime for like 9 years. Well, the guy specifically, I mean, there's more than one. But there is a gentleman for SMU named David Miller, and he was the point person that really got this done. Okay, he oil money guy, SMU alum, oil money guy, but he basically said, I will front a whole lot of that money that we would have gotten if it was a true equitable TV disbursement like the other ACC schools are getting. He said, no. We don't want your money. I got it. Get us in. That's how it got done. Without him, SMU is also in the abyss. They're not in the ACC. Even with Dallas and even with – it came down to money like so many of these things do. And that was the difference maker in that. So he is the boss as well as anybody else that can afford to just pay a big buyout, which might be happening soon for some of these coaches across the country. All right, time to get to the mailbag. The mailbag from Justin in Atlanta. Is it fair to say Penn State is the biggest threat to Michigan's Big Ten dominance instead of Ohio State? Also with Bama's loss showing questionable quarterback and secondary play, who's the biggest threat to Georgia in the SEC. Lastly, ESPN College Football tweeted out that this is the first time since September of 2017 that each of the Power 5 conferences are represented in the AP Top 5. I did not know that. Good pull, Justin. Do you all think we're headed for a classic, unpredictable NFL parody-like season, or will we end up with 2 from one of the Power 2, SEC, Big Ten, again in the playoff? Okay, a lot to unpack here. Penn State, from a talent perspective, could certainly lay claim to being number 2, but I got to see it first. I got to see it, Jason. I got to see them get over that hump before I go there. So I'm still going Michigan 1, Ohio State 2 in the meantime. Bama, who's the biggest threat to Georgia? Well, I said at the beginning I thought it was LSU. I'm going to stay with that, even though they had the disappointing loss to Florida State. I've got more faith in Jaden Daniels than I have in Jalen Milroe. Sometimes it comes down to just that simple of a factor. And in terms of could we have – I mean, this could be the most intriguing playoff that we've had. Yeah, if we had 4 from basically we're down to the Power 4. We need to stop saying Power 5. Could we have 1 from each? 1 ACC, 1 Big Ten, 1 Big 12, 1 SEC. I certainly think that's entirely. I think it's the best chance we've had of that happening for a while. At the beginning of the year, I certainly would have put my money on 2 from the SEC and maybe 2 from the Big Ten, but I'm not so sure now. I think Texas, Florida State, certainly one of those, you would think, at least, is going to find their way into the playoff.
Notre Dame. If Notre Dame
and Notre
wins,
Dame, yeah.
I mean, they'll earn it. 'Cause, I mean, you got Ohio State, Southern Cal, Clemson, at Louisville, at Duke, which are tougher than that sounds, that kind of thing. But I'll remind these folks that are caught in this world where it's always the Big Ten and SEC that's not really the case. 9 championship games, only twice has a Big Ten team gotten to the championship game. Ohio State, both times they won it in 14, lost it in 20. Other than that, it's been mostly ACC, SEC, Mike, or SEC, SEC. And then last year we had the first Big 12 sighting. And we had a Pac-12. But Oregon, of course, made the first one. So, I know the Big Ten has the most money. I know the Big Ten has a lot of name brand schools and a lot of fans. But I don't know if they always play the best football, Mike, especially when it comes to playoff time.
What the Big Ten really needs is Penn State to actually come through this year.
That'd be really interesting, I think. James Franklin's kind of been simmering on one, right?
Yeah. That would be good that's a classic. Like, it might be bad for whichever Big Ten team they knock off, but it'd be good for the league as a whole.
It's like when LSU won it in 2019 for the SEC.
Right.
I thought,
Yeah, no question. Because if you start living in a 2-planet universe, then sometimes that's more of an indictment on the depth of your league than it is kudos to the 2 teams that keep winning it every year, competing for it every year. From Tim, Tennessee Tim here. With Bama getting smoked by A&M and looking average again, is there a chance Tennessee is the number 2 team in the SEC with a chance to be number 1 with a win against the Puppies in Knoxville in November? Tim, I will have a much better answer for that question after I see what they do against Florida. And I don't mean just win the game. I don't mean just eke it out. Like, you should go in there and have a convincing win if you're as good. If Tennessee football is truly back, because we know Florida's not there yet, Tennessee should be able to go in there and win that game convincingly. And Joe Milton should show us all, make believers out of us all, that he can't just throw the ball 85 yards, but he could also complete it 15 yards on 3rd and 7, 20 yards on 2nd and 11. He can make all the throws and be accurate and not just throw a 98-mile-an-hour blistering fastball, throw it over the plate on everything else. Then we can safely say that would be the case. Finally, yep, go ahead.
This next 3 weeks to me, not just the Florida game, I think UT San Antonio and South Carolina, that'll give us a nice 5-game sample size for the Vols. That Austin Peay result worried me a little bit as far as they're concerned. I mean, it's just Austin Peay's not all that great. Will Healy is not walking through that door, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see. And UT San Antonio's got they're a good team. And then the Gamecocks did what they did last year to Tennessee, and since 2010, that series goes 3-3-3-3-3. So we'll see. And then A&M comes in after South Carolina, and then Alabama. So we'll find out about the Vols soon enough.
Finally, Tony from Kentucky. I know it's early, but some are saying, not you, some are saying this will be a down year for the SEC. The ACC is 4-1 against the SEC so far. What are your thoughts? My thoughts are Danny Cannell and Joel Klatt are happy people. My thoughts are kudos to the ACC and kudos to who was the other conference that had the big the Pac. Yeah, I mean, kudos to everybody who's had a win against the SEC. Kudos. I think again the middle of the SEC is suspect this year. I'm not going to say the top is down. I'm not going to bury Alabama, although even a lot of Alabama fans are so angry and full of what and vinegar that they want to bury their own team today and this week. I'm not down on LSU, and I'm certainly not down on Georgia. Teams 4 through 14. There's a lot of meat left on the bone. Let's say that to see who's actually good and who's mediocre.
We could call this a volcano year, like you like to say. There's volcano programs, or a renaissance year, if you will. What if the Final Four ends up being Tennessee, Florida State, Notre Dame, and Texas?
Now you got something. Yeah, if Tennessee and they got that game at home, if Joe Milton balls and they believe they've got the receivers to replace the 2 they lost to the NFL. They believe their the running backs are good. The offensive line's good enough. Defense is better. It couldn't be worse. If all that happens, again, that would be one of those things, JC, where quite honestly, it would be good for the league. Because at some point, somebody other than Alabama, Georgia, and LSU have to be in this conversation, and they haven't been for a while.
I thought A&M would. Man, I maybe
you're not alone. There's a lot of people that thought that.
I did. I took the bait. Now, honestly, to my credit, last year I told everybody, I was like, yeah, they're probably a year away, guys. But next year is here, and still, oh God. I mean, they held Miami. Miami could hardly cross the 50 against them last year,
right?
And then they go and get skunked like that. Mercy.
And their problem is not quarterback, as best I can tell. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of other things, but it's not.
He's good.
Oh,
Connor's good.
He's good. I mean, there's a lot of programs that could win with Connor Wegman. So sometimes the excuse is you can have everything right, but you don't have a signal caller and you can be doomed. That's not the excuse. They've got a quality quarterback, and they still got smoked. That is concerning.
And Evan Stewart, the receiver. He's special. 12 catches.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we are out of time. Right on time.
Man.
Again, check out the website, jcandmorgan.com. Keep the mail coming on the mailbag tab. As always, appreciate our fine sponsors, including Elite Roofing and Restoration. Give them a call if you need some work done on your roof. JC, what else can you tell the fine folks about this fine podcast, installment number 211?
Absolutely. You can catch us live on the live stream. Don't forget to download the Chief Sports app. That is, we are part of that, and the ever-growing Chief Sports app.
More to come on that.
More to come pretty soon on that one. Sorry for not getting to the Five and Dimer. In season, that gets a little difficult, but we did talk movies today. So just want to let you guys know that. We did mention it.
People miss the Five and Dime even in the middle of the season. They want us to break out some movie talk.
Man, I do too. I love it. But look, we'll get you something. I know I'm in the middle of watching one of the worst movies ever. It's another Roland Emmerich film, like a disaster, called Moonfall.
Never heard of it.
Oh, gee. This is like the same person that did Independence Day, Day After Tomorrow, 2012, all that. It's supposed to be apocalyptic. Same premise. as Independence Day, right? And I love Independence Day. It's a guilty pleasure, but it has Halle Berry and Donald Sutherland is in it. And the whole thing is a mysterious force is forcing the moon off of its gravitational orbit. And it's about to crash. And yeah, dude, it's awful.
Already lost me.
I feel,
just watch Jaws again.
I feel bad for Donald Sutherland and Halle Berry because they're talented, you know.
They got paid.
They're in this daggone movie. I'm like, boy, what a cash that check, man.
That's a Jimmy Sexton type of move. They got paid.
So
the buyout was good, even if the movie flops.
Dude, I couldn't
got the buyout.
I couldn't believe it. I was like, God damn, there's Donald Sutherland, man. You know. So anyway,
and he's a terrific. The last movie I saw was Oppenheimer. It was terrific. Actually saw that in the theater. And I'll say this: I'm finishing up Dope Sick after I watched Painkiller, both of which are about the opioid epidemic, more specifically the OxyContin epidemic. They're both powerful, and I realized how ignorant I was of just how big a problem that is. Because we've all taken painkillers. I've never taken Oxy, and I don't really have an addictive personality. But man, oh man, I'd be scared to death after watching those two docs, which are really well done, on the dangers of that. I don't mean to sound like a PSA, but holy smokes, that ruined a lot of lives.
I took an OxyContin one time, and I've never taken one again.
You on Oxy would make for one hell of a podcast, but I don't think we should go there.
No,
I don't think that.
I mean, like the other Tommy Boy, Black Sheep. Yeah. Where he and David Spade are like, because the nitrous oxide leaks in the car. They're like all stoned. Anyway, that'd be kind of funny.
Or the DiCaprio, Jonah Hill in Wolf on Wall Street.
Oh my God.
Taking the Quaaludes.
Oh my Lord.
Apparently
they couldn't walk.
Thing. Yeah. He's driving a friggin' Lamborghini on Quaaludes and running over everything. Yeah. Well, we'll bring back the Frank the Tank JC, one of these podcasts, one of these shows. But in the meantime, we're doing this clean and sober as per usual. Thanks again for everybody tuning in. We'll see you next week. For JC and our producer, Mad Dog Phil, doing outstanding work as always. This is Mike saying so long. See you next time.